At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
August 24th, 2016, the I Am 911 movement is born. One of my personal stories set the tone for this movement. What started out as a way to raise awareness for the reclassification issue for dispatchers quickly turned into peer support. 911 professionals from all over the world were sharing their stories. On Facebook alone, at that time, the engagements were over 34 million. It spawned a peer support session at conferences called Imagine Listening, where dispatchers shared their stories out loud or on paper. For years, I have been asked if this would ever become a book, coming June 2023, and available now for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. From Titletown Publishing, Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we are about to get started with Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast. Thank you so very much. And there's a lot that has been going on these past few weeks. I believe once you see this, it should be about the first week of June. and we'll be going into, we'll be about a couple of weeks away from the National NINA Conference, and that is going to be an excellent one. I'm going to be out there for the podcast. NINA and Within the Trenches podcast, we've had a partnership since 2013, where they have hosted the podcast in their podcast zone, and that started out with myself and Mark Fletcher. At that time with Avaya. Now he's with 911 Inform, and he does several podcasts. Make sure to check those out. And it's been an excellent experience. So I am super excited to head back to NINA. It's going to be in Texas, and Grapevine, Texas, that is, at the Gaylord out there. And my ass is going to be driving. Yeah, it's probably about 16, 17 hours, something like that. But I don't want to risk the chance of the merch that I'm bringing to not make it. I did that once. I sent it. I'm not going to say which carrier, but I sent it. I didn't get it back until 2 months after, because it never made it. It never made it to the conference. And two and a half months, something like that later, I finally got it. So I am not going to risk it, and I'm going to drive down there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm also going to be doing an Imagine Listening session there, so please make sure to come out to that. And also the book, Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday, will be launching at that conference. Again, I am super excited, and I Can't thank you all enough for that. It's going to be excellent. It's currently up for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, as well as Books A Million, and you can check that out at links.co. That's links with two i's.co/WTT podcast. A lot of more cool stuff coming up, but we'll get to the rest of that another time. I am very excited for my guest today, and we've kind of emailed back and forth for a while, and we ended up finally touching base at the Texas conference. I was out there as a keynote speaker, also doing the podcast as well as Imagine Listening, and we got a chance to sit and talk for a while and got this set up. I think we rescheduled a few times too, but we are here and we're going to do this. My guest today is Bridget, and she's an attorney as well as a former deputy sheriff and founder of Lady Law Shield. Good morning.
Hi, we made it.
Yes, finally. I think it's been a year or so. We were kind of emailing back and forth,
Yep.
and things just life happens, right? Life happens, and yeah, I think I think you sent me a message or something or an email while we were at the conference, and I just happened to see you sitting in the I don't know, foyer, whatever it is there, and I went and sat down next to you, and I said hello, and you turned and looked, and you're like, "Oh, hey!"
Yeah. Yeah, that was me trying to finish my slides for the presentation I was giving that day. So yeah, you sat next to me, and I didn't even think about it because it's that busy hallway, and people were sitting down, and you I like, what? And this guy was looking, and then because you paused before you said,
I
"Hey."
did. Yeah.
Like, is she gonna see that somebody's sitting there? Yeah, my cop skills are maybe on the decline.
Yeah, so I was walking by and I had done the same thing. I stopped and I looked and I was gonna go. I was like, "No, that I think that is her."
Yeah.
And yeah, and then yeah, that's when I sat down and everything. I thought, "Oh, she probably thinks, okay, fella, who's this creeper? Is just
Well, as I told you
here."
that day, it's like I may or may not have been slightly stalking you for over a year. Just kidding. Because you do so much great work. And I told you that day, I follow Sarah with 911 Women, and y'all do so much work together. So,
Yeah.
it's hard not to see one of you if you follow both, because y'all do so much great work. So yeah, I mean, here you are, stalker on the show.
We had our own Dateline episode. All right. For over a year, Bridget
Yeah.
was. Oh, that's funny. No, I'm super stoked to have you on finally and for us to talk, and just a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in general while we were sitting there, which is funny because yeah, you're right. You had your you you had your laptop up and you had mentioned that as well. I was like, "So what are you working on?" It's like, "My presentation." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can leave you alone."
Yeah. It was just finishing touches.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always something, right? When you're getting ready to do a presentation, and I don't know about you, but for myself and those who are listening as well, if you've put on presentations or taught or whatever, uh, even like assignments, I think I'm done, and then I go over it just one more time,
Mhm.
and I find
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
and then I'm like, okay, if I change that, then I need to change this other piece
Yeah.
too, and
Mhm.
then before you know it, you've gone through a few different slides. You're like, why did I do that?
Well, and I did it where I had two presentations that day, and one was I had these great flow things, and I thought, oh,
Mhm.
that's too much on one slide, and then I broke it down to where it's like, okay, one bubble, and then two bubbles, all the way until we have seven bubbles, and I had these two different things because there's illegal stuff. Like one was on workers' comp, and one was on how like the flow of a discrimination charge, and then I get to I think it was the workers' comp one where I had copied over the two. Like once I did all the work on the one, I just duplicated the page. Well, I forgot to change the text in the little boxes.
Oh,
So
no.
the text didn't match at all. And I was like, dadgummit. But no, it's okay. I promise I know what I'm talking about.
It happens. I've
Yeah.
done the same thing. I've also
Yeah.
had moments where I was doing a presentation and with like if you have a Mac, I don't know if PCs do this now
Mhm.
too, but if you have a Mac, you can connect your phone and everything, and you can get your text messages right on your laptop. And I remember I was doing a presentation once, and a text message came over that was supposed to just be for me,
Yeah,
but everyone else saw it, and I you can hear the snickering, and my face is hot and
yeah,
red, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
moving on.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's funny. Yeah,
shit
I'm
happens.
surprised it didn't happen to me. Maybe I got lucky and remembered to put on do not disturb, but I mean, I probably just got lucky because yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, again, I'm super happy to have you on and to learn more about you, but also what it is that you do as well with Lady Law Shield, and you also have some wellness and a lot of other things that we're going to talk about as well. But first, let's go through your story. Like, how did you get into public safety to begin with?
It's just funny. Somebody asked me that the other day. I joke and say that around the time I was finishing college, I watched GI Jane and decided that would be cool. So
Oh,
I did.
well, I mean,
Yeah, and so I went into law enforcement, which was quite the I mean, and also to just like tell you how nobody in my family's ever been in law enforcement or public safety. No dispatchers, no EMTs, no cops, and no firefighters. And um, the week before I was graduating from the University of Florida in horticulture, so I used to know a lot about plants. I didn't want to do that job. It wasn't the week before. I mean, that last semester, I was like, oh crap, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And um, I exercised. I thought I wanted a job that would require me to be fit, but I also wanted a job that mattered. And so, and then because I'd watched GI Jane, and this is like no disrespect to any of the Navy SEALs out there, but I just thought, well, wow, I mean, if she can do one arm push-ups, maybe I can too if I work on it. But just decided I would do like law enforcement, but the federal level. In order to get to the federal level, I went to my local sheriff's office. When actually I had a phone call with somebody from the FBI, and they were like, "Yeah, you're just still a little bit too young, and just go get some experience and call us back in about 4 or 5 years." And so I decided to do. I said, "Do I need law enforcement experience for that?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, I at least want my resume to look a little bit better." So I chose law enforcement to get there,
Mhm.
and ended up starting the police academy the week after I graduated University of Florida. So it was right. I mean, rolled right into it. Um, and my family thought I was nuts, especially my dad, because like I said, nobody's ever done that before. So
So, okay, so let's back up a little bit. So you get this degree and you know a lot about plants. And
yep,
then you end up watching this movie, which is a great movie. I
yep,
mean, if you're looking for any sort of motivation, like that is one of them because
yeah,
Demi Moore is pretty badass in that movie.
yeah,
And she goes through a lot of shit and handles it.
yep,
And I can see the inspiration and motivation and stuff to do something that's bigger than yourself, right? You know, a lot of
mhm,
people when they get into service and you know, that's one of the big things. It's not
yeah,
just helping people, it's they want to do something that's bigger than themselves.
yeah.
So you have this moment and all, and then you lay it on your parents that you're gonna get into law enforcement. Was that just a like, are you kidding me?
I think so. If we back up a couple years before that, maybe
Uh-huh.
let's see. Yeah, I was in engineering, agricultural and biological engineering, but also had no I didn't even know what engineering meant when I chose it. I went to law school. I went to college thinking I'm going to be an attorney like Tom Cruise was in what was that movie? The Firm. Like that
Yeah.
looked cool. Well, then thinking, wait, he's a tax attorney. Like that sounds awful. And
Yeah.
so I went to Florida and then just had no idea, like most kids, have had just like, how can you pick what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 18? And I think I don't know what my original degree major was, but then I switched it to engineering because my uncle was an engineer and he's a really good guy. And I thought, well, I'll just do that. Well, 4 years later, here I am like up to my eyeballs and like physics 1 and 2 and the class that comes after that, and every single math, like, calc 1 and 2, you probably don't even know if you've never done it. There's the class that comes after that is differential equations. It was awful. So you go on in physics 1 and 2. It was just, and I remember I was just so miserable. And I'm a firm believer that life's never too late. And I don't really probably couldn't articulate that at the time, but I had this really great manager at the job I had, and he was such a great mentor. I mean, really, that I'm on the path I am today in life because I knew him in my 20s, and I'm a long way past my 20s, but probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I sent him a message and said, look, I just want you to know I wouldn't have the things I have in my life if it weren't for you. So if there's somebody like that in your life, take the time to tell them because it matters. But he was like, he had traveled around the world, and I decided I would quit school, work a second job, quit college, by the way, and go to New Zealand by myself. So that conversation did not go over well with my dad. I got accused of like everything in the book, all the bad things that could happen to someone in life. And I've none of it. I can honestly say, I mean, I'm no judgment. I've never done a drug. I've never been, heavy. I just am not that. I just wanted to do it. And I guess you can say one of my traits is that I'm not afraid to jump out there or try something. I mean, as a parent now, I could say, holy crap, would scare the crap out of me if my 21-year-old was traveling to the other side of the world and this was before cell phones were a big thing. So the only way I could contact anyone is if I stopped to get on a payphone. Yes, for the young people out there, there's a thing payphone that you'd have to stand in one spot to use that was attached to the earth. Anyway, so
with a cord.
I withdrew from engineering. I actually quit. I was working at a health club, and it's the Gainesville Health and Fitness Center. If anybody's around that area, you should go. It's an amazing health club because it's run by really amazing leaders. Anyway, worked at UPS loading trucks in the morning to make some money. And then I went to New Zealand. I think I was gone. I can't remember if it was a little over a month. So came back, kept working. I was completely on my own at that point because my dad, we didn't talk for almost a year. I was getting no money. And then kept working, switched over to environmental horticulture because a friend of mine had done that. And it was still the horticulture part, which is the agricultural part. I just never saw myself being an office person.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's part of why I thought the job of law enforcement would work for me too. Because the College of Horticulture accepted all of my maths and sciences as my elective. So I only had to take the core horticulture classes. So I was able to finish that in a year and graduate. So then, fast forward or rewind to what I just said earlier, which is that then I realized, well, crap, my specialization in horticulture, because again, I was young and didn't know what I was doing, specialized in like mass production of things. So like when you get to the poinsettias at the end of the year, like I would have worked at the place that grew nothing but millions of poinsettias. And that just seems so boring to me. Like talk about monotonous. Or we went to a place that grew acres and acres of celery. Like, ugh. So I just feel like everybody's had a lot of crossroads in life. And that was all of a sudden I thought, I don't want to do this. And again, the guy that I worked for was still my mentor. He was so great because he would just talk you through it. What do you want to do? What would you want to be? Just there's no barriers. If you could do anything, I know it's because of him. I thought, well, I'll just become a cop. But for the reasons I said, like the physical challenges, the doing something that matters. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in like that our country, that the Constitution matters. And I believe in the separation of powers and all the dorky things I could talk about with the law. But I believe in those things very much. And so I thought, well, that's cool. I could be a part of that. And so that's a really long way of answering your question, but there you go.
No, this is good because it's interesting how life changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how the thoughts that we had of what we thought we were going to do ends up going a different way, and a lot of times it's for the better, and sometimes it does take a while to get there, right? You go
Mhm.
off the beaten path or whatever, and then you get to your spot and you think it was worth it. It was
Mhm.
worth it, where I'm at now. So when you end up going through all of this and you start like academy style, I mean,
Mhm.
even before that, was there a like physical challenge, an assessment or something that you needed that was required for you to go through or surpass in order for you to get into the academy?
That's a good question. Later on, I did apply to FBI DEA. I got very far in the DEA process. And that remember theirs. I mean, the whole psych test, the physical, the running test. I remember almost throwing up for that. Um, but I don't remember that for the sheriff's office. I'm sure, hopefully, I did. Now, their physical standards, I think, are just ridiculously low. Um, like the
Hmm.
physical test that law enforcement has to go through to maintain, to pass every year is so. When I was in it, it was such a joke. Um, I mean, one of the guys I was also on, we'll talk about this later, but I was also on SWAT team, and one of the guys I was on SWAT with just to prove a point did the entire obstacle course backwards under the time that they said you had to do it. So anyway, I don't remember, but like I said, I came out of working at a gym, so it worked out. I would run. I was a runner by the time. I mean, not an ultra marathoner. I was just a 3 miler or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure I did. I didn't have any problem passing that. And then, of course, and then went right into the academy. And of course, with the academy, they push you as much as they can. Um, Lots of PT, physical training. I actually got highest fitness award at the police academy, which was shocking to me because we had a guy that was a former Marine, but also the former Marines tend to be on the bigger, like big dudes, and they're not always fast and they don't always like running. But anyway, um, but yeah, I don't remember that part. I remember that I know for sure. Like I said, I don't have any connection to law enforcement prior to that. And so I knew somebody who worked at the sheriff's office, met with him, and the captain and the or I guess he was a lieutenant at the time in charge of the HR recruiting hiring process. They both said, well, you should do some ride-alongs first. So I did two ride-alongs. Definitely was eye-opening to see things that you've never seen before. The hurt, the injured, the harsh. I mean, I remember distinctly one of them was a domestic violence situation. You walk up and when you've never been in that world, you always think, oh, the poor woman. You walk up and this woman tells you this whole story and you think, oh, that guy, what a turd. I'm gonna try and keep this G-rated. And then you go talk to the guy and realize that in that situation, like she had beat the crap out of him, and he was a black guy, but he had these three white marks on his face. I remember walking up thinking, "What are those white marks?" She had scratched him so deep that there was no. She had scratched the color off his face, and it was the under, like the fat layer under his skin. It was white. I remember thinking, "Holy crap!" And
Wow.
they both got arrested because that's how it works in domestic violence. Is if you both hit each other, then you both go to jail.
Yeah.
Because as you know, in domestic violence, you take away the decision of who gets arrested from the victims or the participants. So anyway, I remember that was eye-opening to me because I'd never seen that, just the aftermath of violence up close. I mean, you've seen fights in college or whatever, but just that stuff I feel like hits closer to home.
Mhm.
So I mean, I certainly did the ride-alongs, and I remember thinking, wow, I'm really going to do this. And I'm sure this could get worse. And
Right.
it did. Um, but yeah, I thought, screw it, I'll do it. It can't be that bad. I'll be fine. And then, you get in it.
So you do the ride-alongs, which I will say, where I had done ride-alongs since when I very first started in dispatch in, Central Florida in the small police department in, the city of Frostproof. I would on my days off, my nights off, I would ride with, one of my friends, one of the officers that I worked with, and she and I would sit stationary, and she would she would test me. We would have, um, everything going, and every time a car would come up, I would have to guess the speed, and then she would guess, and we would see who
Mhm.
was closer, and of course, because she had more experience, she was always
Yeah.
closer, but I started getting a
Mhm.
lot better and a lot better at it because I was doing this in dispatch, but I actually ended up going to try to be a state trooper in Florida, and,
Oh.
the only thing that kept me out there was 2 points off of my credit score, and
Oh,
they didn't
ooh,
bring
that is
me
kind
in because of that. Yeah,
mm,
so but I'm glad that that happened because, I mean, this is what I
yeah,
do for a living now, and I
yeah,
think this was definitely my calling. I don't know how it would have gone, I think I still would have done well, but I'm happy with the way things went, so
mhm,
I would do ride-alongs there, and there were a few times where the ride-alongs, like, some funny stuff happened,
mhm,
and when I moved back to Southwest Michigan, there was some interesting things that happened in those ride-alongs, but I didn't see a lot of harsh things. And I will say this story
oh,
really quick, that one of those ride-alongs that I had in Florida, there was this dance hall that was in town every Friday and Saturday. There they would have dances going on. And one of the nights we're there, I'm doing the ride along and we're sitting stationary and tones go off because there's a fight that's going on there. So we haul butt over there, lights and sirens, which it was like 2 blocks away. So it really wasn't that far. But we get there and there's a crowd outside. The security is pulling one guy out of the building, and that guy is kind of like trying to wrestle with him a little bit, like to pull
mhm,
away,
mhm,
not fully wrestle with him, but pull away. And then there's another guy who's walking behind them, who's doing nothing but walking behind them. And another security guard runs out, gets pepper spray, gets in front of the guy who's just simply walking and starts just
oh,
spraying him all over his
oh,
face. And this is as we're pulling up, and the guy is screaming and yelling, "Dios, por qué, Dios, por qué?" And I start laughing in the car right off the bat, and the officer that I'm with, she goes, "What was he just yelling?" And I said, "I shouldn't laugh, but the dude just started yelling, 'God, why? No, God, why?'" And it was comical in that moment. Like it's like something that you would see on a TV show, like it was
mhm,
an SNL skit or something where the
mhm,
person's just like, "Why, God? Why?" And so then she's trying not to laugh as she's getting out of the car to go and assist them, and I'm just sitting there like, "Better you than me."
yeah, especially that pepper spray, like, hold you do that with a 10-foot pole because that
Have
gets
you
on
been
you.
sprayed?
Oh, yes, when I was in the academy, we didn't have a choice. We had to get sprayed, doused in the face, and they made us look up and down, left and right, and then have
Oh,
to fight and then have to fight through it. Because if you spray somebody and you're fighting, it's gonna get all over you. It's not like a taser where you can tase and which I also kinda sorta tased myself one time. Not really. It
oh,
was it
sweet.
was
We'll talk
elite.
about
Yeah.
that next.
Yeah. But, not really taste myself. I didn't get the prongs in me. It's just that you shoot that and those
Oh,
prongs go on somebody and the leads that are leading back to your the gun the I hate to say gun part, but you know what I mean.
yeah.
Um, those are live, so if you touch those wires, you're gonna get zapped. But anyway, we had to get pepper sprayed in the police academy and fight through it. I actually posted a picture of that on my Instagram account, not too long ago, and it was freaking brutal, and it is not pretty afterwards for a long time.
I was gonna
I
say,
mean,
did you have, like, snot all over the
snot,
place and
just
you were just
you can't
crying?
do anything about it, but the good thing is, you spend 4 months with everybody in the academy, and so we all were buds, although I don't sadly keep in touch with any of them. But also that's just kind of my MO because I moved around a lot in life growing up. But anyway, so yeah, it was absolutely awful. So I hope you didn't get obviously you would know that if you had gotten anywhere close
Yeah,
to
no,
yeah.
the only experience that I have with pepper spray is I don't know about your high school, but every senior class would do a senior prank, and
Oh,
when I think I was a freshman, I was I had gone outside of the classroom to use the bathroom, and when I came in, there were people running, and I was like, What are the seniors doing?" They had sprayed the hallways of the high school with pepper spray, and when it was right before a little bit before, yeah, because it was towards the end of class, and the teacher's like, "Miss Martinez, you can't wait." I was like, I really cannot. I can't." They're like, "There's only, like, 10 minutes left." Anyway, the point is that it was right before the bell rang for everyone to come out,
In the
and
hallway.
people
Oh,
were coming, yeah, when they went out, all you hear is people coughing and just dying from it, and
yeah,
that was the senior prank, so that's my only,
that's not a good
run-in.
thing.
No, no, it was pretty messed up,
Oh,
but
that's
that
horrible.
was, yeah, that was my only run-in with pepper spray, other than what I saw there, and just why, God, why? For
I know.
real.
Seriously. Yeah.
So, you end up going through all of your training and well, the academy rather, and all of it. Was there anything that surprised you, or was it pretty much how you imagined it would be?
I so I would guess this would track my whole experience, that I would have thought being a female just right off would present a lot of issues, or that there would be a lot of physical challenges that would just be really hard, or maybe I couldn't even complete them.
Mhm.
Or, and none of that happened. I was not a gun person. I don't know. I don't think I'd ever even fired a handgun before I started at the police academy. But what I've learned is you're actually a much better student. Like, if you've had no experience, then they can teach you exactly how to handle the weapon, exactly how to hold it, exactly how to
Very
stand,
true.
which eye to focus on or whatever. And so yeah, there was a day that I had to. One day it didn't go so well, and I should get in your head about things. But like the physical part, like I said, I ended up getting the highest fitness award at the academy, which really shocked me. I figured, just I don't know what I thought. And I also just think that people go in and don't really give it their all, or don't really try. I mean, I think if any of the guys, because no matter what I do, I'm not a guy, and I don't have testosterone, so I'm not as strong, I'm not as fast. And if any of them had tried to their full ability, I would not have been highest fitness. I just, like I said, that was an important part of it to me. So that I really got into it. I really liked it. I mean, there's been different times, like when I was on SWAT team and we were training for SWAT competitions, and we would train a lot of physical training, obviously a lot of shooting. And I just think, like, if I could have, I think in my next life, I would rather maybe either be a professional athlete or an artist, because I feel like my brain as an artistic part just doesn't work. But I just love that part of it. And so I was surprised that wasn't harder. I was surprised that I would kind of look around, but not really recognize it in the time, but in hindsight, seeing, wow, but you could do this too. Like I don't do anything that it is like everything I've done is something anybody is capable of. My physical abilities is just because it's something I do, and feel like, oh, but I can't do that. But yes, you can. Or and I quit later and went to law school. And be like, oh, I could never do law school. Yes, you could. It sucks bad, but you could do it.
Right.
All
If you
this
truly want something, you'll
training.
get it.
I've taken 4 different bar exams in 4 different states, and that sucked really bad every time. But I mean, my point being, I just don't like. I look at it and think, well, if you want to do it, then just do it. And I don't think that sounds special. I think everybody has that in them. So, and then I started at the sheriff's office, and I thought, this is great. This is fun. I got this. And then, you make a mistake and things start not going well. And then you see bad things. So eventually, you're like, oh, this does kind of suck. So I feel like at first I thought, oh, this is fine. I got this. And then the realities of it start to hit in. And the realities of me being a female in that profession, doesn't show up blatantly at first, but it certainly shows up over time. And especially with the narcotics unit and the SWAT team that I was on. I mean, I was only female in SWAT team, and it was obvious, but not at first. Like, I thought they would really bad haze me, or just never, I thought there'd be maybe more explicit things said all the time, but that it wasn't that blatant, but it certainly cumulatively has had quite the effect. So in the beginning, I would say, it's it was surprising that then to the extent I thought, oh, this isn't so bad. I got this. And then the realities of the job always catch up with you. I just think if you ever hear anybody say, oh no, it's fine, there's no problems in any area of first responders, then I'm just listening long enough for you to tell me you haven't been in the job for very long. So,
Right.
because it happens no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember some of those once you had gone through the academy, once you, joined the sheriff's department, became a deputy and everything? Do you remember some of those first calls that you went out to?
Yes. So, what I think struck me the most of being in law enforcement and being the person, I remember when I was FTO, which is not field training officer because I was a deputy, but FTD, not to
Mhm.
be confused with the floral company. That I remember the first time. So the first phase, your first month, like you don't do anything you're supposed to watch. Like you're supposed to like just sit and shut up. And then the second month, you start to transition. And then the third month is it's supposed to be all you. They just, they don't even, some of them won't even really answer your question. It's like sink or swim unless you're about to die.
It's like
Um,
a shadow phase.
yes. And so the first phase, I remember, I can't remember if it was the first or second, it was my second month. And like we went on a scene and there had been a shooter and we found the gun was under the car. And I just jumped right in. And it's just, you just have to realize, you have to really, in the way, I guess that's the way I did it. And so you really have to, I had to learn at my training deputy had to say, Bridget, like step back, observe your surroundings, because then you start to realize, like you really, oh my gosh, like this is real. This is not a TV show. This is not training at the academy. This is real. There's a gun under that car. If there's a gun under their car, is there another gun somewhere? Because then you really start to think, and it literally gives me the chills to say it now, because the longer you do it, the more you think, oh crap, like really start to, you see something, then you like, let's take a step back, let's take cover, let's look, let's get in a more tactical, safe position. Because you don't just like, oh hi, what's going on with you today? What happened? Oh, there's a gun. Like, he's like, oh, okay, let's slow this down a minute. And I had to learn that's that second month. He'd say, like, literally, he'd like pull me on the collar and say, Bridget, just stand here for a second, let's figure out what's going on, don't stop just jumping in. And I think that's common with a lot of just new people on the scene, but out
Yeah.
in the field. But then, at some point, I got to do my first traffic stop, like all on my own. Saw somebody running a red light, not a big deal, but I thought, oh, he just ran a red light. Can I stop him? And my training deputy was like, I don't know, can you? And I said, well, can I? He goes, I don't know, can you? Like, dadgummit, just answer my question. Said, well, did they break a law? And I said, yeah, they ran the red light, a stop sign. He says, well, is that something you can pull somebody over for? I'm like, yes. And he's like, then why are you still sitting here? I'm like, oh, so, lights and sirens. And first time ever pulling anybody over, I just kept thinking, I can't believe I can do this. I have the constitutional power to take away your freedom to move about right here in this minute. And if you run from me, I have the power to put you in jail. And if you like, that all started like, holy crap, and I recognized right away that's a heavy thing and not something that should not be taken lightly. And then moving on is that then I am on my own. The very first call, my very first day out of training, because we didn't have partners. I had a car by myself. And of course I was the FNG, the freaking new girl. So I
Yeah.
was way out in the country, boring zones. And because anyway, it's like we had like the city, but outside of the zones, it was the county in this country. And it's not that much going on all the time, unless you get to the hillbillies that maybe are making crack or meth. But anyway, so I remember like times where I'd pulled somebody over on the stretch of highway. There was no light. So it was one of those nights like dark as the background on your screen. And this guy, I had, because I worked nights, I had the earpiece that went in my ear so that you couldn't hear what came out of my mic or whatever
Right.
that piece is called. And they say he has a warrant. And so like, oh, okay, well, I'm not doing this by myself. And so then I remember distinctly pitch black in the summer, hot as hell, it's Florida, and having to wait until I got back up to come and having to talk my way why this was taking so long. And because never would I have said, well, you have a warrant, I'm going to have to arrest you by myself on the highway against a dude. No. And so I distinctly remember that feeling like that took forever. It worked out fine. We had arrested, no problem. But the one thing, one of the worst ones was, and it'll stick with me forever, is a 2-year-old that found a gun while everybody else in the apartment was passed out, stoned. And the call was like, it's still like, I don't care how many times I talk about it, I get the chills. It still makes me want to throw up. That I ended up encountering the mom holding her 2-year-old in her arms with a gunshot wound to the head. And then we didn't know, she was obviously frantic. And that's one of those scenes like, oh, dear God, please let the ambulance show up where I am right now. And they did. I remember they showed up really quick, took her, because I was running lights and sirens. The ambulance was running lights and sirens. Obviously, we ended up meeting at a stoplight. Like, I was coming this way, she was coming this way. She gets out of the car and is running in traffic to get to us to try and help. Obviously, we couldn't help. But then I remember going back to the apartment complex, and the only way we could figure out which apartment she was in was tracking the red and gray dots on the sidewalk back to the apartment. Like,
Wow.
it was one of the worst experience. The frantic, as a parent, you would know. I mean, I'll never forget that woman. It's truly awful. So yeah, there's a lot, that I would say that's the worst. But the stuff that bothered me the worst always had to do with kids, because adults are stupid and they can make their own decisions. But it's the things that impacted kids, like the living conditions that they would be in, the neglect, thankfully I never really encountered very many of the abuse situations, but obviously it happens a lot. But I was in the narcotics unit, so we would do undercover and we would go do search warrants and get into these people's houses, and the stuff that if you're selling and making crack in your house, it's not a clean house and there's filth everywhere and you got kids and they're just living, and it was just horrific. But I mean, yeah, all that.
Wow. I can't imagine, seeing all of it and everything. I mean, to a point, I see things. And what I mean by that is when I was taking phone calls, I'm piecing it all together in my head.
Mhm, mhm,
So that's
mhm.
what I mean by, me seeing things. And, when it comes to, drug houses like that and stuff, I remember people calling in and talking about living conditions, but also taking calls from folks who had, um, their houses or even cars possibly exploded because they had like mobile meth labs in there,
Yeah.
and thinking,
Mhm,
damn, like this is nuts. And, um, or one time there was a call with a truck that it had mattresses in the bed of the truck, and there was blood and stuff hanging like in between the mattresses. It turned out it was not a body, it was a deer or
God.
something like that. It was an animal. Yeah,
Oh,
it ended up being an animal, but you best believe we treated it like it was a person because
yeah,
of the amount of calls that we got in and people getting over there. I mean, it was like felony stop style and everything.
yeah.
And, you mentioned being in, narcotics, but also, SWAT team and everything too. And I knew a lot of the guys and gals that I worked with that were on the SWAT team, but there was one thing that I will never forget. And I was sitting on radios, excuse me. And when something like this would go down, if someone called out for code 7, that was our emergency traffic, and we would send
Mhm,
everybody else to a different channel, and we kept the
mhm,
main traffic there under code
mhm,
7. And it was a situation where, I think it was a domestic actually, and one of them had a weapon. SWAT team was in the area, and I remember one of the guys from SWAT keying up on the radio and telling me, um, their position and that they had the suspect in sight. And I
mm,
remember, and it's giving me goosebumps now thinking about it, but I remember after I repeated that traffic sitting there just imagining what was going on, and the fact that this person just told me that they had them in sight, like in their scope. And I just thought,
yep,
man, I hope everyone ends up safe and that this person just
mhm,
puts their gun down, which
yeah,
they did. They were out there for a long time, but the person eventually put the gun down, and everyone went home safe. Everything was fine. But
mhm,
damn, it's one thing to be hearing it, but
mhm,
of course, for all of you to be out there in the field and going through it, I wanna back up really quick before we kinda get into your, your transition and all into what it is that you're doing now. I kind of want to go back to those first traffic stops, because you
Mhm.
mentioned, you're like, I'm doing this, like I'm actually doing this. I have the power to do this, and the knowledge, and I've got someone here with me who's going to be who I'm doing this with. I'm actually doing this right now. Do you remember that moment of realization? Just that feel? I can only imagine the nerves, maybe some sweating going on, because you're pulling somebody over for the first time. You've passed by cars, I'm sure, many times before, and you've
Mhm.
seen this, but now
Mhm.
you are the one who's doing it, and you're walking up there to ask these questions and everything. What was that even like? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I don't know, this sounds silly, but part of it was I didn't wanna look like I didn't know what I was doing. And
Oh, of
so,
course, right.
back when you still had paper tickets, there was nothing electronic that got printed out. And so I had my
Mhm.
ticket book and I had and I probably knew what the basic violation was. I don't remember. But maybe I had to look it up. I don't know. Back then, there was you opened the book. I mean, so we didn't have tablets. But I just remember thinking, like, I want to be able to do this. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing, but also thinking, holy shit, like, I really hope this guy stops. And then he stops, like, I really hope this guy doesn't want to fight me. And then, because you just don't know. I mean, traffic stops are one of the most
Yeah.
dangerous missions for law enforcement. And so, it was fine. I remember distinctly, it was University of Florida. I worked for the sheriff's office, so we could work in the city limits, but they have their own cops. But either way, it was like the morning of a football game. So University of Florida, it'll be a big deal later in the day, but early in the morning, there's nobody moving around. So I remember there was not much traffic. There was not much happening yet. And I remember just being like, oh, it went smoothly. And then, and then I kind of felt bad for giving him a ticket because I remember how bad it sucked to giving him a ticket, and
Right.
um, over my time, I gave a lot of warnings because I think that with most good people, giving them a warning scares them enough. Or if I say,
Oh, for
license,
sure.
registrations, proof of insurance, and like, I'm pulling you over, I could give you a ticket. And then if you don't have any of those things, I could give you 3 more tickets. And I could get a fix-it ticket where it only costs you, like, go show you have your license or your insurance. And so, like, at the time it was like $7. Or I could just be a complete turd if you're a turd and give you, like, the not fix-it ticket where, I mean, you're going to get all the money and all the points on your record. But
Right.
um, and so I remember telling people, like, this can go good or it can go bad. And you can choose, but right now we're heading towards the bad. If you want to keep running your mouth, here's my warning ticket. Here's my ticket book. So, I mean, warning book, ticket book, you decide. And because I remember one guy arguing with me one time about whether he was speeding. And I said, yeah, like, I even tried warning him. Like, I got ahead of him a couple times and slowed down, and he kept getting ahead of me. And then I'd get ahead of him and I'd give him the whoop whoop. And then he'd go back and then he'd go in front of me. And then I got ahead of him, whoop whoop, and turn my lights on for a second because I was like, I'm just not in the mood for this. And then sure enough, he kept speeding past me. I'm like, you're an idiot. So I pull him over and I was like, dude, I tried warning you. You can't pull me over for this. Like, you were speeding. Yeah, but you can't pull me over unless I'm going 10 miles over the speed limit. And I was like, I'm not
Oh,
sure who told you that's in the law books, but and he just kept arguing with me. And I said, look, buddy, I was going to give you a warning, but you were not helping yourself. And nope. And I gave him all of them. I gave him the ticket. I didn't give him that. He didn't have his insurance. He argued with me about that. And I was like, here you go. Have a good day. Um, so, but also, like, that, I don't know if I said this. Like, my very first call by myself in a car on January 1st, and I loved it. I got the shift I wanted, which was 3P to 3A. 3 p.m., maybe 3:30 after roll call, January 1st, by myself in a car. It was a shots fired into an occupied home and the shooters on scene. And I was about 5 minutes away. So I was going to be the first person there. And you talk about pucker factor, because you obviously don't stand around if there's an active shooter because you don't want people to die. But holy shit, all I could thinking is like, okay, I'll have to position my car so I'm behind the engine block. So if they shoot at me, it'll get through the car, but it won't get through the engine. By the time I got there, the shooter was gone. But that was oh my gosh, this is real. And Nobody was hurt, thank goodness. Nobody been shot. But I was like, the difference of how that could have gone. Like
Yeah.
that hit me hard in that moment. But yeah, it was
Jeez.
yeah. Like, and then nobody showed up. Like nobody was even like running to me because I got there so quick. And when you leave the sheriff's office, there's still a good decent number of us because there's an overlap. There's 7P to 7A to 7P, and then we come on at 3P. And so there's overlap of shifts between 3 and 7. Well, the whole time I worked, there was overlap of shift. And I remember thinking, why is there not anybody else here? Like, I know that I just called out, like somebody called out the shooter's gone, but still nobody else rolled up right away. So I don't know how that could have gone, but sometimes the fates are aligned, you know?
Yeah, no, very true. And oh man. Yeah, those are moments where I remember hearing that all over the radio, and all of us in dispatch would just be like, "Oh, come on, guys, get over there."
Well, and
Whoever was going.
when the new people coming out. You know when the new people are rolling out. Like they knew I was
Yeah.
brand new. So what were they thinking? Like, oh, this oh man. Um, but yeah,
So
there's
how
no
many years were you in that agency and everything, from, being a deputy to also being in narcotics and SWAT and all of that? How many years did you do that?
it was an intense 4.5 years. So I would say a short experience, but I did patrol for a year and
Mhm.
then I switched to the undercover narcotics unit. Again, because I was wanting to position myself for a federal job because I thought that would be better. And also, I very quickly learned that no offense to all the law enforcement officers out there, but we all know that not all law enforcement officers are proactive. Not all law enforcement officers are in good shape. And I just quickly realized that there was a somewhat of a laziness factor present. And that's not why I took the job. I wanted that active, proactive
Mhm.
challenge fit. And so went to the narcotics unit because that was also, we had a uniform version of it and an undercover version of it. So and that was also a lot of the, like the warrants guys, the canine guys, the SWAT guys. And so, and they didn't have a female. So I fit that role. So within a year, I was in the undercover narcotics unit being the female. And I think it was 2 months later. I remember I got into the narcotics unit in November, but I feel like I tried out for SWAT in November and it took them maybe about 3 months to put me on the team. And I learned later it's that they still had the spot and I filled the all the qualifications to take that spot. And I learned later it's that because my SWAT commander didn't want to put me on the team and my captain made him put me on the team. How do I know that? Because he told me that. My SWAT commander told me that 3 times. That the only reason I was on the team was because the captain made him do it. So anyway, that's another conversation.
Well, I was gonna
Um,
say, and that probably made you wanna push even harder to show that, that
well, I
there
didn't
was a
know
reason.
as he kept telling me that. So I was on SWAT for maybe a little over 2.5 years. Well, so it's like I said, I got on narcotics in November, SWAT team in around January. And then I did both of those the whole time because we didn't have a full-time SWAT team. That's what you call a call-out team. And I did both. And then fast forward 2.5 years later, I'm walking into my captain's office saying, I need you to take me off both of them right now before I start just foaming at the mouth with all the stuff that I want to tell you has gone wrong. And I also knew at the time I was going to be leaving to go to law school. So the last 3 months or so, I went back to patrol on day shift to try and just stay out of the way because I just didn't want it.
So then you end up leaving, you go
Yes.
to law school,
Yes.
and you end up being the founder of Lady Law Shield, but you
Mm-hmm.
also are doing like yoga work and a bunch of
Yep.
other things. So let's transition into that as
Okay.
we're getting close actually, all because you have to be somewhere. So I want to make sure to get to this information here. So there's a lot of things that go on, whether it be liability or just, I don't know, legal
Mm-hmm.
issues in general.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some of those things that you do as well that are important to dispatchers. So what are some of
Yes.
those things? But also, what kind of wanted you, or what was your motivation rather, to go into this side of it?
Well, I obviously left well, no, obviously, I left law enforcement because I decided that was not a battle I was going to fight for the rest of my life. I don't know how to do law enforcement any other way than I did it, like being on SWAT team, being active, being in that proactive role. And I also knew that I was going to have to fight those battles of trying to prove to a bunch of people that I can do the job, and knowing that my efforts wouldn't really matter. It's better now, I think, because the guys that I were on SWAT with at the time, all of us FNGs are the guys. Like if I was in still, I would be close to retirement. Those are the guys running the SWAT now. I think it would be different with them, but it wasn't then. So what I have done, so I went to law school because honestly, I didn't know what to do with my life. I put all my eggs in one basket with law enforcement. It was going to be what I was going to do for the rest of my life, and then went to law school simply because I thought, well, this can't be a bad thing, right? I mean, it's law school. I don't know what I'll do with it, but I'll figure it out. And so as we're talking about do not disturb earlier, so there. So went to law school, got out, ended up meeting my now husband while I was in law school. I was in Florida. I moved to Texas and got a job because I just needed a job. And then I just knew that somehow I wanted my life I wanted to help law enforcement in some way. My experiences of what it was like on SWAT team, and feeling like I had no one to turn to, nobody that could understood what I was going through. I didn't have anybody in my agency that I thought could understand being the female. I didn't feel like I had anybody I could trust. I was in a union and I did not ever reach out to I just kept getting in trouble all the time. And I got investigated by internal affairs, and it was just all the time in trouble. And I just realized at some point, realizing everybody else around me was making mistakes, but they weren't getting written up for it. They weren't getting 500 mountain climbers for it. They weren't getting letters in their file. All this crap. I was always on probation or something. And so, fast forward, I guess I've gone through my legal career, and I've always been in civil litigation. I never had any desire to do criminal defense or to help bad guys make cops look bad. I mean, cops do that well enough on their own, but I knew I could help somehow. And then as the further I went into law enforcement, and really it was the summer of 2020 with the George Floyd incident that happened, I got really mad about how it seemed all of the world was just automatically turning against all cops. And because we all know those are few and far between of when you have the bad apples. You have a lot of really good people doing really good work. And I also know that firefighters struggle with the same, have the same struggles. And I know dispatch struggles with the same thing. So when you talk about PTSD, that's not just law enforcement. It's all aspects of the first responder world. And so I wanted to do something where I could try and help with the wellness, try and help them figure out, look, I know what it's like to go through this, but here's the things I've learned over the years that could help. And then also that I am an attorney. I wish I could have had somebody like me to turn to when I was a cop to say, no, don't put up with this. Here's why. Here's your options. Here's your answers. And so I ended up creating my law practice in a way where I know that most times cops or any first responders just need answers. What can I do about this? And am I really the person in the wrong, or what are my options? So my first level of work with my clients is I call it a level 1 consultation, where I look at everything that's going on with your situation. And I mean internal issues. So I specialize in employment related matters for first responders. So harassment, discrimination, retaliation, things like that. And I evaluate what's happening, and then I can say, no, you can't really do anything about this, and here's why. Just having a crappy supervisor doesn't mean you can sue them for it. But if your supervisor does this, yes, you can sue for that. So I provide answers. And then and I have level 2 and level 3 where I can start doing things for you and I can represent you. But also, and this is how you and I met at that conference we went to, I don't do a lot of workers' comp, but I advise on it in the sense that PTSD is a real thing. And for almost every state, all first responders, PTSD is considered a job-related injury, whereas for most civilians, it's not. And there's there's just a broader range of job-related injuries for first responders that that's not so for civilians. So things like PTSD, which, if you're in the job long enough, everybody suffers from something on the job, and whether or not you really get to PTSD, but it's to say that that's covered under workers' comp. And what does workers' comp mean? And that's what I'll spend time saying, but look, don't ignore this. And here's why. Here's what some of the things that you could get if you make this claim, and you can't wait too long. And, here's what your options are, and here's your deadlines. And so I consider what I do as an attorney to be a wellness tool, because I can help you provide answers. And I think a lot of times people just want to know, what are the options? Give me some answers. And then they start to feel better about it. And because a lot of times you feel like it's so far out of your control. And I want you to feel like you have some control in that. And so that's how I evolved my legal practices. Once I learned how to do the job as an attorney, I realized, well, this is how I can help. I can help give you answers, and you won't feel so alone. And and then you can move on. You may not ever need me again. I hope you don't. But in that moment, I can help.
See, that's a really good thing, because I know that. Well, so I was in a union
Mhm,
when I was working in Michigan and stuff. So there was a lot of different things, a lot
mhm,
of different ways that things were done then. But there are a lot of questions. A lot of times when you end up hearing someone say, "Oh, you're gonna be careful, you're gonna get sued for that," or this or that. Or I remember one time someone had called in because it was something that happened in the wintertime. They were claiming that I had told them to do something, which was a complete lie, but what they
mhm,
were doing is they were threatening to sue me and the
mhm,
county, and I
mhm,
remember my deputy director at the time telling me this, but then chuckling to say, "We played the tape back for the person, and you tell them several times not to do what they're blaming you, trying to
mhm,
say that you told them
mhm.
to do." And I was like, "Well, I'm glad we had the tape then,
Yep, yep,
because it would have been my word against theirs, and, what rights do I have?" And,
mhm,
so this is a good thing
mhm,
for, to have someone like you to be able, to explore a lot of those issues.
mhm. Yep. I think it's not, and say, I definitely include dispatch in that, because you still work within the world. Whether, like, my agency, we had dispatch and, on the same property, so it was the sheriff still ran it all in our jail. It's corrections. I really extend it to probation and parole, because you're still encountering the same people. Um, and because you're still working in that world, that paramilitaristic world, I mean, that's where I think, like, what I do and my understanding of that world helps, because if you've never been in it, you really don't, there's no way to understand it. And I know there's a lot of great people doing work within the first responder world that have never been in it and just want to help, and God bless them. But I just also think, having worked in it like you have, or so many people, you just don't really know what it's like until you've done it. And having that understanding, I think, helps me tailor the services that I offer in the most effective and efficient and economical way. I mean, I think I'm a good attorney. So if you really need me, I'm not saying I'm cheap. But I think it's valuable in the sense that the biggest, I think, mistake, this is what some I haven't encountered any other first responders that do this, but cops think they know all the laws, and then they'll start representing themselves, and then they want me to come in and start fixing it. I'm like, dude, this is not gonna, like, I gotta charge you the highest level just to start. Like, why? I've already done all this stuff. I'm like, I know you kind of messed it up, and I'm not putting my name or my bar licenses on the line to go fix your stuff. It's gonna take, I
Right.
have to do a lot of work. So, but there's value. And then, like I say, that's why I offer that first level of consultation, because it's affordable, it gives you answers, and then you can decide where you want to go from there.
Perfect. Well, we've got just about a few minutes left of this episode, so I've got a couple questions for you, but
Okay.
this main one here. So for anyone who is, well, first off, if you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself at the beginning of your public safety career, what advice would you give yourself?
At the beginning or around year 4? um,
However you want to put it.
I think, because year 4, I think for a typical career is very early on. I think I would go back and tell myself, it doesn't matter what other people think.
Mhm.
Um, and because, as we all know, as we've gotten older, is it does, because it truly doesn't. Just do what you know is right and keep on keeping on if that's what you want to do. I don't regret leaving law enforcement, because I can help in the way that I can now. And my only regret is that I never spoke up enough about what was what was happening, because I thought, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I just want them to value me as an operator. I want them to value me as an investigator. And no, if I say something, that's all they'll talk about. Well, come to find out, they were never going to value that anyway. So I would go back and tell myself, number one, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And number two, stand up for yourself. Because I thought I was standing up for myself in the sense that I just kept on working hard. But really, sometimes you just got to say, this is crap. Stop it. Here's why. Because you don't have to be all mean about it. You can just say, this is not okay. Please stop. And then that's an important step for people to start to bring control back into their lives.
Awesome. Very well said.
Thank
I
you.
love it. So for those who want to learn more about you and everything that you do, services that you offer and such, where can they find you? Website, social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely on social media, Lady Law Shield, but I would recommend everybody go to my website, get on the newsletter list, because I do send out periodic short. I don't provide like legal dissertations, just short little tidbits on things that I think matter to the first responder world. And also, if you sign up, by the time this comes out, if you sign up for the newsletter list, I'll share with you some sort of, I call like flow charts. So if here's what a worker, if you have workers' comp issue, here's how that would look. If you have a harassment discrimination issue, here's sort of how that would flow. So, sign up for the newsletter list. I'll give you those free downloads. And then also, if you do need me, I do offer a free 15-minute phone call to help kind of figure out, like, do you have something that I could help you with or not? Almost always it's yes, you have. If you call me, you have something. It's very rare that somebody reaches out and I say, no, you just have a jerk supervisor. But you can follow along on social media. Definitely, like, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. But first step is go to my website and get that information, because I think it'll be helpful.
Awesome. Excellent. I am
Which is,
super
I didn't
stoked.
say, ladylawshield.com. That's the website.
There you go.
Ladylawshield. Yeah.
Perfect. LadyLawShield.com. Make sure to check that out. And it's been awesome to have you on here. And I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments or questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services. And a big shout out to subscribers of the podcast, as always. And if you want to become a subscriber, if you want to follow us on social media, check out the merch on our store, all of that good stuff, you can simply head out to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn Live, as well as Twitter. And then you can listen to the show 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.